Metroid Zero Mission is a game I adore, and one of my favorite remakes of all time. Everything from the game's open and free-flowing level design, which allows the player to sequence break items and even boss fights, to the risks the game took with an added section that wasn't in the original Metroid, Zero Mission is up there as one of the best games in the 2D Metroid series. However, if this game has one obvious flaw to me, it's the boss fights. They're not horrible, but most of them pale in comparison to the quality of the rest of the game. Heck, they pale in comparison to the boss fights in Metroid Fusion, the previous Metroid game that released a few years prior to Zero Mission. I don't think the boss fights drastically drag down Metroid Zero Mission as far as an overall game, but they are a minor blemish on it. So with that in mind, I thought it'd be a fun challenge to rank them, and I figured now is as good a time as any to make this video a reality. How I'll be determining this ranking is largely how much fun the individual bosses are to fight, but I'll also be factoring in a couple of other elements as well. Some examples of what I mean by this include the atmosphere of the fights themselves and unique gameplay mechanics a few of them introduce. We're also going to be judging these bosses on the normal difficulty mode instead of the hard mode, since that's the difficulty mode that most players experience the game at. I will admit that hard mode does make a lot of these bosses better, but again, I want to stick with what most players are going to be experiencing when they play this game for the first time. So with all that being said, let's rank the bosses of Zero Mission from worst to best and figure out why some of them work and why some of them fall short. Spoilers ahead for this game obviously, so consider this your warning. Kirogiro. There's an argument to make that this isn't even a boss fight and more of a set piece or a puzzle. Personally, I don't really consider it a proper boss. All you do in this encounter is shoot one of the creatures from its underside to kill it, and drop bombs and Morph Ball to finish off the other one. It's over in less than 30 seconds, and I don't consider it a boss fight, but if we did count it, this is where it's going. Ensnared Kirogiro. Now there's a couple of reasons why this is my least favorite traditional boss fight in the game, but the easiest explanation as for why I dislike this boss is that it's extremely boring and there's virtually no challenge. Kirogiro is suspended at the top of the room, trapped by vines while a single Ripper flies around the arena. In order to defeat it, you have to freeze the Ripper in just the right spot so you can get the perfect angle to shoot at the vines with your missiles. There is just no energy or urgency when it comes to this fight, and it's the one spot in the entire game where the pacing comes to a screeching halt. You just wait for the Ripper to reach the right spot, freeze it, shoot the vines on one side with your missiles, and then repeat on the other side. The only form of attack Kirogiro has is the circle of slow-moving spores it shoots out in all directions, but these are quickly taken care of by a couple of shots from Samus's beam. Once you destroy all of the vines on both sides, Kirogiro falls to the ground defeated. The only positive thing I can say about this fight is that I like how you use something else in the environment, in this case the Ripper, in order to help you deal damage to Kirogiro. Besides that, it's easy, dull, and forgettable. DRM. This probably won't be that shocking putting this near the bottom of the list, but it's gotta go somewhere, right? This giant centipede creature appears right after you collect your first missile tank, and seeing as how it's the first boss fight of the game, it's insanely easy and in fact optional. If you don't kill it within a certain time limit, it'll actually leave and can be encountered again when navigating through Brinstar later on. It's a simple fight where you shoot it in its eye 3 times with missiles while you dodge its bite. It'll also toss spikes at you from off its body, and once you finish it off, you'll be rewarded with the charge beam. It's a really basic fight that feels more like a mini boss more than anything else. Still, the fact the boss can actually roam around Brinstar if you don't kill it quickly enough is kind of cool, and most players will more than likely be caught off guard when it quickly shoots out from the ceiling and traps Samus for the first time. What puts this boss above Kirogiro is that at least with DRM, the fight is pretty quick. There's actually a bit of tension with his sudden appearance, and the music shifting to a far more hectic track. On top of all that, you can also receive an item upon defeating the boss, unlike Kirogiro, which just so happens to be the charge beam. It's pretty simple and easy, but as a first boss, I suppose it does its job well. Ridley. Look, I love this evil space dragon as much as the next guy, but his fight in Zero Mission is pretty underwhelming. You do get a cool cutscene at the beginning of the encounter, with Ridley swooping down from above and then the fight immediately starting, and the game has been building up to this encounter. But this boss fight is a bit lacking because he goes down really easily. Just spam all of your missiles and super missiles at him and it'll be over before you know it. He has a lot of the same attacks as he does in Super Metroid, but because he has less health and deals less damage than he did in that game, there just isn't much of a challenge here. One of the weakest encounters with our boy Ridley in the entire series, if I'm being honest. He's still fun to fight, I just wish he was more of a threat or a fun gimmick was introduced for the battle. Imago. Imago is a wasp-like boss that just so happens to be the final stage of the Kirugiru life cycle. It's actually the ensnared creature I talked about a little bit ago, but fully hatched. He flies down from either left to right or right to left and attempts to ram Samus. Do enough damage to him and he'll start to shoot stingers out from his abdomen. What you need to do is shoot him with missiles right where his stinger is. It's far easier to do this while running behind him rather than facing him from the front. He's pretty easy now, but I remember him giving me a little bit of trouble when I first fought him back in the day. It's not horrible, but like a lot of the bosses in this game, it just feels mid. Not a whole lot going on, but at least it's a little challenging with the amount of damage he can do to you, as well as how tricky it can be to land those missile shots. Plus, who doesn't love swatting a pesky fly from time to time? Mua. This boss encountered in Kraid's lair is fought right after activating a power grid that allows Samus to use these zip lines throughout the sector. It ambushes Samus, biting at her, and raising the acid that surrounds the arena to try and burn her. It's fast moving, and in order to damage it, you have to shoot it in its eye. The best strategy for Mua is to bait it into biting Samus on one side of the arena, and then quickly take the zip line on the ceiling to the other side, and then start shooting at it with missiles. This fight is just okay. I do really like how the boss fight incorporates the zipline mechanic, but I wish it was expanded a bit more. Overall, Mua is an alright boss. Not great, but not horrible either. Chozo Warrior Spirit. After narrowly surviving a crash landing back on Zebes and losing her power suit in the process, Samus manages to arrive at a giant sculpture depicting a proud warrior belonging to the Chozo race, a species that adopted and raised Samus at a young age, and this Chozo monument is one she's visited before, as seen in the flashback before the fight begins. After a brief reflection on the past, Samus channels her spirit to that of the sculpture, resulting in the Chozo Warrior spirit coming alive and battling our heroine. This fight acts as a test for Samus, designed to see if she still retains the strength and integrity of the Chozo race. It roams around the arena, shooting lightning at Samus periodically. In order to defeat it, Samus has to shoot the orb it holds when it flashes. Do this 4 times and the fight is finished. Admittedly, the fight itself isn't really anything to write home about, at least in terms of gameplay. You just dodge the boss as it flies around the arena and shoot the orb at the right moment 4 times. However, it's everything else that surrounds the boss fight that really makes this encounter stand out. We've just spent the last 20 minutes or so as Samus without her power suit, dodging space pirates and sneaking around the environment, while we're in a severely weakened state compared to what we were at the beginning of the game. And once we arrive at the sculpture, we get this really cool flashback where we see a young Samus with the species that took her in and raised her at a young age. It really adds a lot of emotional weight to this fight. We're not just fighting a spooky Chozo ghost, we're proving to the Chozo that have passed on that their spirit and ideals still live on through Samus. By defeating the Chozo spirit and passing its test, we've proved to it that Samus is just as much of a Chozo as any member of their own race. And our reward upon conquering this trial is regaining access to Samus's fully powered suit. Now we can completely annihilate anything in our path, space pirates included. So while the fight itself is a bit lacking, I would argue that this boss has the most stakes behind it, and the power rush you get immediately afterwards after regaining your powers still hits just as hard decades on from my first playthrough. If the fight itself was a bit more fleshed out, it would easily be my #1 boss fight of Zero Mission, but as it stands, I still really enjoy it for what it is. Make way for everyone's favorite Godzilla knockoff, Kraid. I love the battle against him in Zero Mission. It may not be that difficult, but the scope and scale of the fight really makes him stand apart from the other bosses in the game. That introductory cutscene that plays when you walk into his arena is so good. It's almost like Samus woke him up from a nap or something, and now we have to deal with the fallout. Having the camera behind Samus in the second shot of the cutscene also really puts into perspective how massive Kraid is. The fight itself is pretty tense, with Kraid flicking his nails at you, pretty gross by the way, and occasionally swiping at you with his claws. Once you do enough damage to him by shooting him in the mouth with some missiles, he'll even start launching these fleshy spike-looking appendages out of his stomach, just in case you wanted to be even more grossed out. It's strange because 90% of the time I can kill Kraid quickly with no issue, but if I'm not locked in and have his pattern down from the get-go, he can actively prevent me from damaging him. Either way, the fight is satisfying, fun, and Kraid has always been a favorite of mine. His Zero Mission incarnation is probably my second favorite Kraid fight of the series, with only Dread surpassing it. So yeah, don't sleep on our favorite green scaly boy. He can catch you off guard every now and then. Mecha Ridley, the final boss fight of Zero Mission, and a fun one at that. Now, a lot of people find this fight a bit anticlimactic, considering it sort of comes out of nowhere, and I somewhat agree with that. But I really enjoy fighting this oversized robotic contraption, and I like his design despite being an unfinished project by Ridley, because, you know, we sort of sent him to the Shadow Realm earlier. But when it comes to the fight itself, he has a number of unique attacks. He'll swipe at you with his claws, fire missiles at you from his backpack, cover the arena with fireballs, and shoot lasers from his eyes. Mecha Ridley has it all. His weak point is right around where his lower intestines would be if he had any, and you have to fire either regular or super missiles at it to deal damage. I think a big reason why I like this fight so much is because of the variety of attacks Mecha Ridley has. On top of that, having the weak point being in an awkward spot, along with Mecha Ridley sometimes blocking it with his arms, it can be a pretty difficult fight for newer players. I remember him giving me a hard time during my first playthrough, but with enough determination and a bunch of well-placed missiles, you too can overcome this mechanical menace. And once you do, he triggers a self-destruction countdown, forcing Samus to escape the pirate frigate you fought him in. And while I won't count this since it technically isn't a part of the fight itself, this is my favorite escape sequence in the entire series. I just feel like I should bring that up since they flow so well into one another. So yeah, Mecha Ridley drags himself into the number 2 spot. So that means for number 1 we have Mother Brain. This might be a hot take among Zero Mission fans, but I don't care. I love this fight. After defeating Kraden Ridley, the path to Turian, where Mother Brain resides, opens up. Battling through Rinkas, which are these energy-based projectiles which infinitely respawn throughout the area, and even Metroids themselves, we arrive in Mother Brain's chambers. First, in order to even get to her, you have to shoot these shields with a ton of missiles in order to allow Samus to press on even further. All the while, Rinkas and these turrets continuously shoot out projectiles which are quite hard to dodge. But once you break through a couple more shields, you finally arrive at the fight itself. Breaking the glass container which protects Mother Brain, you then have to shoot her in her singular eye, dodging a large energy blast she shoots out at you after landing a hit on her. On top of this, lava covers the bottom of the arena, and those previously mentioned Rinkas and turret fire continue to rain down on Samus. One way to make this fight easier is to freeze the Rinkas in their spawn points, preventing them from tracking Samus and also preventing them from spawning more in. And while Mother Brain herself really only has one attack, this fight can be brutal for most players, and is a pretty big difficulty spike compared to all the other bosses that came before. But that's part of the reason why I enjoy it so much. It's an actual challenge, unlike most other bosses in the game, even on normal difficulty. Not to mention, this fight has some build up to it. The intro to Zero Mission alludes to this fight from the moment you boot up the game, as well as the cutscene that plays when you first enter Norfair. And if you've actually read the prequel manga to this game, it adds even more context and emotional stakes to the showdown. But I won't count the manga's context towards this ranking, just the dynamics of the boss fight itself, which are intense for the reasons I stated earlier. It can be a real pain to get through this boss fight, but I highly enjoy the challenge, and having the game build up to it makes it even more satisfying to finally land that last missile, finishing off Mother Brain for good. At least until Super Metroid, that is. And with that, guys, my boss ranking video of Metroid Zero Mission is complete. And now we come to the part of the video where I say, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a like, give me a subscribe if you want to see more Metroid content, because there's more coming down the pipeline, especially with Metroid Prime 4 on the horizon. And yeah, follow me on Twitch too if you want to see me play some games on there. Also, before I go, leave your ranking of the Metroid Zero Mission bosses down below, because I want to see what other people have to say as well. So yeah, guys, that's it for me. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.